Book of Heaven, Volume 20, Part 21. February 9th, 1927. Incapacity of writing. Just as the sun always gives light, so the Supreme Volition wants to always give the light of its manifestations. When one neglects to write what Jesus says, I felt like I did not want to write, because I felt incapable. Not only this, but the prostration of my strength was such and so great that I felt I could not do it. And I thought to myself, maybe it is no longer will of God that I write. Otherwise, He would give me more help and more strength. And besides, if Jesus wants, He can write by Himself without me. And my always lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, My daughter, the sun always gives light, nor does it ever tire of following its course and of investing the surface of the earth. And its triumph is when it finds the seed in order to make it germinate, and to develop it in order to multiply it. The flower to give it color and fragrance. The fruit to give it sweetness and taste. By communicating its effects, the sun shows, with facts, that it is the true king of the earth. Therefore, it triumphs when it finds the one to whom it can communicate its effects, exercising its royal office over the whole nature. On the other hand, in certain lands, where it finds neither seeds, nor flowers, nor plants, nor fruits, it cannot communicate its effects. It keeps them all within itself, and therefore it feels without triumph. It is like a king without subjects, who cannot exercise his office. And so, as though indignant because it cannot communicate its effects, it burns that land so much as to render it sterile and incapable of producing a single blade of grass. Now, my daughter, the sun is the symbol of my will, and by its own nature, my will wants to follow its course of light in the soul in whom it reigns. And since its light possesses innumerable effects, it never tires, nor does it exhaust itself. Therefore, it wants to communicate its effects. And its triumph is when it finds the dispositions in you. Then more than to a seed, a flower, or a fruit, it can communicate its effects. The fragrance, the color, its sweetness, that converting into knowledges belonging to it, form the enchantment of its garden. And my divine Fiat, more than sun, feels like the king who is able to exercise his royal office. It feels it has not only its subjects, but also its daughter, to whom, as it communicates its effects, its manifestations, so it communicates the likeness of Queen. And this is all its triumph, to transform the soul into Queen, and to clothe her with royal garments. And since all of my manifestations about the supreme Fiat shall form the new garden of the children of my kingdom, it wants to always place its effects in you with its light, so as to make it rich and luxuriant with all species of celestial flowers, fruits, and plants, in such a way that, attracted by the variety of so many beauties, all shall feel as though enraptured, and shall strive to live in my kingdom. Now, if you lacked the dispositions to receive the communications of the effects of the Son of my will, and to put them out in order to write them, so as to make known the good it contains and its unheard of prodigies, my will would act like the sun. It would burn you in such a way that you would become like sterile and infertile land. And besides, how can I write alone without you? My manifestations must be tangible, not invisible. They must fall before the senses of creatures. The human eye does not have the virtue of seeing invisible things. It would be as if I said to you, write without ink, without pen, and without paper. Would it not be absurd and unreasonable? So, since my manifestations must serve for the use of creatures, formed of soul and body, I too need matter in order to write. And it is you who must lend it to me. So you shall serve as ink, as pen, and as paper for me. And with this, I form in you my characters. And you, feeling them within yourself, put them out and render them tangible by writing them on paper. Therefore, you cannot write without me, for you would lack the topic, the subject, the dictation from which to copy, and therefore would not be able to say anything. And I cannot write without you, for I would lack the main things to be able to write: the paper of your soul, the ink of your love, the pen of your will. Therefore, this is a work that we must do together and in mutual agreement. Then, while I was writing, I was thinking to myself, before I write certain little things that Jesus tells me, it seems to me that they are of very little importance, and therefore it seems that it is not necessary to put them on paper. But as I am in the act of writing them, the way in which Jesus orders them in my interior changes the scene, and though small in their appearance, they seem to be of great importance in their substance. Given all this, what an account shall those who have had, and those who have authority over me, have to give God, when they have not imposed themselves through obedience in order to make me right? How many things have I neglected when I received no command? And Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "Daughter, indeed they shall have to give me an account. If they believe it is I, the account shall be very strict, because believing that it is I and not taking into account even one word, is as if they wanted to suffocate a sea of good for the benefit of creatures. Because my word always starts from the strength of the creative power. In fact, I pronounced one fiat in creation, and I extended a heaven studded with innumerable millions of stars. Another fiat, and I formed the sun. I did not say 20 words to form so many things in creation, but one fiat was enough for me. Now my word still contains its creative power, and you or others cannot know if my word is directed to forming a heaven, a star, a sea, a sun for souls. Therefore, by not taking it into account, and by not putting it on display for creatures, they come to reject this heaven, this sun, stars, and sea, back into myself. While they could do so much good to creatures. And the harm that would follow would be ascribed to one who, not taking it into consideration, has suffocated it within me. If, on the other hand, they do not believe, it is even worse, because they are so blind as to not have the eyes to see the sun of my word. And incredulity leads to obstinacy and to hardness of heart, while belief softens the heart and disposes it to let itself be subdued by grace and to receive the sight in order to comprehend my truths. February 11th, 1927. Wherever the divine will reigns, Jesus places the strings of his attributes in order. How he must be able to say, "Here is my heaven." How the children of the Fiat shall be kings and queens, and only the one who possesses the divine Fiat has the right to ask for its kingdom. As I was in my usual state, my adorable Jesus made me see many strings in my interior, one close to the other, starting from a sphere that was in the middle of these strings. Under this sphere it was empty, and in that empty space there was my sweet Jesus, who very often touched those strings and played, but in such a harmonious and beautiful way that it cannot be described. Then, after he played his little sonata, he said, "My daughter, these strings are symbol of the soul in whom my will reigns. I myself delight in forming them and arranging them all in order. Look at them. How beautiful they are. Each string has its distinct color, invested with light, in such a way that, altogether, they form the most beautiful rainbow, all radiant with light. But do you want to know why each string has its distinct color? Because each one of them symbolizes one of my divine qualities, that is, my attributes. So I placed everything in order. The string of love, the string of goodness, the string of power, of mercy, of strength, of wisdom, of purity, in sum, everything. I have not excluded even the string of justice. So, when I want to love and be loved, I touch the string of love. Oh, how sweet is its sound! Soft, penetrating, delightful, such as to shake heaven and earth, investing the inmost fibers of all the beings in which my will reigns. And I love, and am loved, because its sound draws and enraptures everyone to love me. And I myself, enraptured by my own love, love, and put out oceans of love. This sound is so melodious as to make me tolerate everything and bear the great evils of the poor world. This sound makes me move on to touch the string of goodness, and this sound calls the attention of all to receive the goods that my goodness wants to put out and give to creatures. Speaking voices can be heard in this sound. It makes all stand at attention. Sounds of surprise, of admiration, in hearing in this sound of voices the goods which I want to give. This sound, while making me put out my goods, disposes the creatures to receive them. Therefore, every time I want to place one of my attributes in office, I touch the string that belongs to it, and I place it in attitude. But do you know why I have disposed all these strings in you? Because wherever my divine will reigns, I want to find all of myself and all the things that belong to me in such a way that whatever I do in heaven, I must be able to do in the soul in whom my supreme Fiat dominates and reigns. I must have my throne, my melodies, so as to be able to vibrate the sound of mercy to convert souls, the sound of wisdom to make myself known, the sound of my power and justice to make myself feared. I must be able to say, "Here is my heaven." After this, I was praying my round in the creation, and while impressing my "I love you" on each created thing, I asked that, by virtue of that divine will that preserves them beautiful and whole, the kingdom of the supreme Fiat might come upon earth. But while I was doing this, I thought to myself, created things are inanimate. Therefore they do not have the virtue of asking for a kingdom so holy. But while I was thinking of this, my beloved Jesus came out from within my interior and told me, "My daughter, it is true that created things are without soul. However, inside each one of them runs the life of my will, and only by virtue of it do they maintain themselves beautiful, just as they were created. Now, created things are all noble and queens, all belonging to my royal family, and by virtue of my will that animates them, and of the acts that my will exercises in them, They have the right to ask for the coming of my kingdom, because it is also their kingdom. In order to ask, with right, for the coming of the kingdom of the divine Fiat, it is necessary to be one from our family, in whom our will has its first place, its throne, its life. This is why first I made you be born in it, so that it might have its rights of paternity over you, and you might have the rights of daughter, in order to have the rights to ask for its kingdom. And not you alone, but also by virtue of all created things. That is, of all those innumerable acts that our will exercises in all creation, to ask that our kingdom and yours may come. My daughter, who can aspire to have the right to be king, if not a son of a king? Even more, everyone sees in him the right that the kingdom shall be his. But if they see a servant, a peasant, aspiring to it, who does not belong to the royal family, and says that he has the right to be king, and that the kingdom shall be his, this one is considered insane, and he deserves all mockeries. In the same way, the one who wanted to ask for my kingdom, but my holy will did not reign in him, being in the condition of a servant, does not have the right to ask for my kingdom. And if he asks for it, it is without right, and a simple way of speaking. Now suppose that a king had, as his children, hundreds, thousands of children, all belonging legitimately to his royal family. Do all of them not have the right to occupy noble positions, not unseemly to their status, and to say, the kingdom of our Father is our kingdom, because we carry his royal blood in our veins? Now, in all creation, in the children who shall belong to the kingdom of the divine Fiat, shall flow, more than blood, the life of it, which shall give them the right to belong to the royal and celestial family, in such a way that all shall be kings and queens. All shall occupy noble positions, worthy of the family to which they belong. Therefore, created things have more right that the kingdom of my will come, because they are all daughters of heaven, and are the acts of my very will that asks for it in them, than creatures themselves, who by doing their will have reduced themselves to the condition of servants. Therefore, when you, in the name of the heavens, of the sun, of the sea, and of all other created things, ask for the coming of the kingdom of my eternal Fiat, you force my will itself to ask for the coming of its kingdom. And do you think it is nothing that a divine will prays in each created thing, as you impetrate its kingdom? Therefore continue, and never draw back. Even more, you must know that it is my will itself that puts you on the way in all creation, to have its daughter together with it in all of its acts, to make you do what it does and wants from you. February 13th, 1927. Until the divine will is known and has its kingdom, The glory of God in the creation shall be incomplete. Example of a king. I was following the divine will in its acts in the creation, and a doubt arose in my mind. How can it be that Jesus says that until the kingdom of his will comes upon earth, the glory of creation and redemption shall be incomplete? How can this be? Does this supreme will, perhaps, not have the virtue of glorifying itself by itself? Indeed, it possesses this virtue, and it is more than enough for its glory. Yet he says that if his will does not extend its kingdom in the midst of creatures, its glory on the part of creation shall be incomplete. Now, while I was thinking of this, my adorable Jesus, surprising me with a most brilliant light that came out of him, told me, "My daughter, the thing in itself is most clear. Until my will is known, and has its first place of honor and dominion in each being that has come out of our creative hands, its glory shall always be incomplete. The reason is most clear. In fact, our prime purpose in creation was that, as we released from us this supreme will, that being bilocated in all creation, extended everywhere, in the heavens, in the sun, in the sea, in the flower, in the plants, even in the earth, and in each being come out of our creative hands, constituting itself life of everything in order to form its life in each being, and bilocating itself in each creature. It might have as many of its lives and kingdoms to dominate, for as many creatures as would come out to the light. Now, my will has not withdrawn. There is not one point to which its divine life does not extend. There is not one creature that is not invested by this supreme will. But while it extends everywhere and invests everything and everyone, it cannot form its life. How many divine lives are suffocated in creatures? How many deny to it the first place in their acts? How many place it after unworthy and vile acts, denying its dominion to it? And do you think that the destruction of so many divine lives of this will of mine in creatures is something trivial? Of so many of its acts, noble and sublime, that it feels as being destroyed, while they use it to form human lives, deplorable lives, monsters that shall serve for hell? And do you think this is trivial, my daughter? The detriment that our glory receives on the part of creation is great and incalculable, such that not even all the good of redemption could repay us, because even with redemption, man has not come back into the unity of our will, nor does it reign fully in the creatures. How many lives, which are said to be good, holy, are halved between divine will and human will. Therefore our glory in the creation is not complete, and only when the things created by us shall serve our own will, as well as those who shall give it the first place of honor, shall recognize it in all things, and letting it reign in all their acts, shall constitute it absolute queen and dominating king, then shall it be complete. Don't you think it is just and a right that since everything belongs to my will, And since my will is everywhere, and is for all, primary life of everything, all would recognize it, and all would become divine will, since they all belong to it. Imagine a king who had his kingdom. All lands, villas, and cities are his exclusive property. There is nothing that does not belong to him, not only by the right that the kingdom is his, but also by the right of property that they belong to him. Now, because of his goodness of heart, this king wants to see his people happy, and so he distributes his farms, his villas, his lands to his people for free, giving them even housing in his cities, in such a way that all can be rich, with abundance, each one in his own condition. And he does all this great good to his people for the sole purpose that they would recognize him as their king, giving him absolute dominion, and recognizing that the lands occupied by them have been given to them for free by the king, that he might be glorified, recognized, and loved for the good he has done to them. Now this people, ungrateful, does not recognize him as its king, and it claims the right of property over the lands that it possesses, denying that they were gifts given by the king. Would this king, then, not be defrauded in the glory of the good he has done to his people? And if you add that they use his lands without benefit for themselves, some do not work them, some remove from them the most beautiful plantations, some render the most pleasant gardens squalid, in such a way as to procure for themselves their own unhappiness and misery. All this would add dishonor and a sorrow that no one could soothe, to the detriment of the glory of the king. This is nothing but the mere shadow of what my supreme will has done, and still does. No one has given us a cent for receiving the good of the sun, of the sea, of the earth. Rather, we gave them everything for free, and only to make them happy, and so that they would recognize my supreme fiat, that loved them so much, and wants nothing but love and dominion. Now, who could repay that king for the detriment of the glory that his people have not given him, and soothe his intense sorrow? Suppose, again, that someone from that same people, investing himself with the just sorrow of his king, and wanting to repay him of his glory, begins at first to renovate the land he occupies, in such a way as to make of it the most beautiful and pleasant garden of the kingdom. Then he says to everyone that his garden is a gift that the king has given him because he loves him. And then he calls the king into his garden and says to him, "These are your dominions. It is right that they be all at your disposal." The king is pleased with this loyalty and says, "I want that you be king together with me, and that we reign together." Oh, how he feels his glory being restored, and his sorrow soothed by this one member of his people. But this man does not stop. He covers all the paths of the kingdom, and stirring everyone with his speaking, he calls a good handful of people to imitate him, and forms the loyal people who give the right of dominion to their king. And the king feels restored in his glory, and as reward, he gives them the title of children of his, and says to them, "My kingdom is yours. Reign, children of mine." This is my purpose, that in my kingdom there be no servants, but my children, and kings like me. This shall happen with my divine will. Oh, how it awaits to be given back its complete glory in the creation, and that it be recognized that everything belongs to it, so as to be able to say, "Everything is yours. Let us reign together." How it awaits for its knowledges on the supreme Fiat to cover the paths in order to stir, to call, to press creatures to come into my kingdom, so as to form my true children, to whom I can give the title of kings. This is why I have so much interest that these manifestations on my divine will be known, because this is about my greatest act, that is, the fulfillment of my glory and the complete good of creatures. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 20, Part 21. Fiat.